Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Slice of Mentorship Podcast. Today, we are privileged to have Ashley Abid with us, a versatile individual juggling roles at Mount Sinai's Clinical Trial Research Center, CTRC, and her entrepreneurial endeavor, Skinterest. Ashley's work at the CTRC has been instrumental in advancing COVID-19 and HIV research, where she's led the charge in modernizing data collection through the creation of electronic databases. Simultaneously, Ashley co-founded Skinterest with Tony Robbins, and it's a remote health monitoring tool designed for patients of color, aiming to bridge the gap in dermatology care. Beyond these roles, Ashley dedicates her time to the Life Science Mentorship Program at Stony Brook University Center for Biotechnology, where she's creating a program that is aiding and advising other entrepreneurs with invaluable feedback from mentor teams. So hello, Ashley.
Hi, Igor.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be with me on the podcast. And I have my first question just to get a sense of who you are. Could you talk a little bit about what do you get paid to do?
Sure, definitely. So I'm currently at my day job, a data analyst at Mount Sinai. I work with the Clinical Translation Research Center, or the CTRC as we like to call it. And for the past 3 years, we have been working on primarily COVID-19 studies. And recently, we've also ventured into other studies, such as on HIV, that I've been helping manage the data on and create databases to collect this data, which I think is something I really want to emphasize in the world of clinical research. There are still a lot of places that heavily use paper sources data. And so I'm happy to say that our site really emphasized the importance, especially during the pandemic when, not everyone could come in person, the use of electronic databases to collect research data. So I was part of creating all those databases using our research tool, which is known as RedCap. And in addition to that, I am also an entrepreneur. I have been working on a venture myself with my co-founder, Tony Robbins, called Skinterest, which is a remote skin health monitoring tool focused on patients with skin of color to help them achieve better health outcomes and also address barriers in dermatology care. And as an entrepreneur, because I know the struggles, I'm also involved with the Life Science Mentorship Program at Stony Brook University Center for Biotechnology. And that is essentially a program through, I think, where we have a mutual connection since it is modeled after the MIT VMS or Venture Mentorship Services program. And so that's essentially I'm excited how I've been able to help support other entrepreneurs by linking them with mentors. And we usually have these monthly mentor sessions where a mentor team will be assembled, which I assist with, to give them I would say, unfiltered feedback, which as an entrepreneur is super valuable, especially because a lot of times the people who primarily feed you your feedback already have a stake in your venture, like, for example, investors and whatnot. So it's really, I think, important for entrepreneurs to have a support system like a mentor team who is consistently and dedicated to just genuinely supporting their growth. So I'm really happy to be part of that as well.
Very cool. Thank you for giving this wonderful intro. But I want to clarify. My question was, what do you get paid to do? So do I understand correctly that you get paid to do your startup as well as the VMS?
You know what? I just remembered you did say that paid. I would say, you know what? I get paid through satisfaction since it is a passion. It started off as a passion project, and I'm happy to say, get some initial funding. So hopefully in the future, and that is like our goal, I think. And I'd love to touch upon like one of the reasons why I think entrepreneurship is so important. My co-founder and I really believe in the value of creating business value, and then our hopes of like trying to establish like generational wealth and things like that. So I hopefully in the not too far future, that will be something that will be a something that will give us the, essentially will be paid to also work on our startup. That's always the goal.
Very cool. Thank you. How do you balance all those three endeavors? And I know you recently got married too, so that must be a lot in your life. So how do you manage to find balance and not go crazy with all that?
Great question. Honestly, I will say that for me, what helps a lot is staying organized. So it's like a very corny tagline, but I always just remind myself, organize, don't agonize, right? There's just so much going on a lot of the time. And I think for me, what helps a lot is, having checklists, calendar reminders, and calendar invites to help me stay on top of things. And I know you mentioned that I had gotten married, and I kid you not, that calendar invites feel like a love language to me. And I remember I had created a calendar invite to share with my husband about on the day we got married, which I thought was so funny. I'm just like, hey, you're accepted. So that's, kind of binding. But no, in all seriousness, I think it is definitely very easy to get lost. And like you said, sometimes there are some days sometimes I can feel very stressed out and kind of feel like I'm going crazy. But I think those are the days when it's especially important to take a break and actually try to let yourself, like your brain literally needs a break to just adjust to all the various demands it's asking of it. And I think when I take breaks and give myself time to reflect and just like decompress, I find myself actually working even more productively because I come up with things, almost like hacks, if you will, and which is one of the things that I love working in this field with technology, is that I think of solutions even more easily when I actually give myself time to decompress and take a break, as opposed to just like crunching everything all at once. I think, sometimes it's really important to emphasize the need to take breaks, which I know with like in the startup space, like everything has to move so fast, but every now and then taking a break is not a bad thing.
I love that you brought up this perspective of taking breaks and slowing down versus trying to be super productive. There is a book that really impressed me. It was called Do More Great Work. And the key tenet of the book is that we get comfortable doing things that we are good at, but to create something unusual, innovative, like to do great work, we need to slow down and we need to create focused time. So do you feel this is something that you are able to do when you take breaks, or this is something that, I don't know, just what's your perspective on this idea of doing great work?
No, I definitely think, like you mentioned, like slowing down and trying to do more great work, with the goal of trying to do more great work definitely applies to me because I see this will happen with my peers. Sometimes when we're just in a like I guess like because of a deadline, we're rushing to complete things. But then when we look back, there were certain things that were maybe like missed or could have been done better. And then I think about it and I realized like, wait, that idea just popped up easily in my head. And I feel like if I had just taken a moment, and whatever a break, there, I don't think there's any specific time, like minimum requirement. I think that all varies from person to person, but it's whatever allows you to truly be able to look at these tasks and like almost like look at the big picture because it's so easy to become overwhelmed and bombarded. And if you don't slow down and try to look at that big picture, you might end up missing important things that in the future you might be really grateful for taking that break because then that saved you even more work. So I think it is actually if anything, it's more productive to take the break versus being counterproductive because I know I've had situations where it's like, if we had taken literally one more day to just analyze everything, be like, okay, is this really what we want? Think of all the pros and cons. We would have saved us more headache in the future because it's just like, you just didn't think literally about the consequences of following a certain path and, evaluating like the various pros and cons, which honestly, I think it's worth it more to take that time if you can.
Sure. So let's talk about some of the great work you're doing with your startup, Skinterest Tech. And I'm curious, you mentioned you have a co-founder. So, how did you meet your co-founder, and what's the story behind the company?
So my co-founder's name is Candy Robbins, and I met her during our master's program at the City College of New York for our master's in translational medicine. So essentially, we both met, because we were both students in the program, but I think we also had just like a genuine connection with each other. I'm happy to say that she's like a very close friend of mine, and I think it's actually something that as you work more in this space, it's really, I think, valuable to find people who you have organic and genuine connections with, because it does make, especially when you're doing like a startup, which requires a lot from a person, including investing personal time, it does make it a little bit, like, if anything, a lot more easier. And I think something I hear all the time in the startup space, I just want to add, is that people say you're like married to your co-founders. So me and my co-founder Tanya always joke about that. We've been married before I was even officially married. Yeah. But yeah, Skinterest is, I like to call it like a labor of love that we created to address the ongoing barriers that many people of color in dermatology face. So our primary product that we're focusing on is related to the lack of image representation for skin of color. So right now, most dermatology databases, like overwhelming majority, tends to be lighter skin, usually of Caucasian skin, and that can be actually really problematic, especially if we have more advanced tech tools like AI image processing tools, because you're already creating an implicit bias in those analytical tools, and that can actually lead to poor health outcomes, because there will be diagnoses or even just like conditions that have already been diagnosed, but just like the severity of it might be missed. And so for us, it was really important that we try to create a tool that was designed with people of color in mind.
And where are you on your journey right now with your startup?
We are still in I would say, focusing a lot on the product development mode, but we've made a lot of really great connections within these past few years with various interested parties. And so, as a startup, you're always trying to like fundraise and make those connections, and the pitching never stops. And I've been utilizing my connections at Mount Sinai to see if there could be any potential collaboration. So we have submitted a couple of proposals. And one thing that I was really excited about Sinai in the beginning joining is because they were one of the first health institutions that had their own skin of color clinic, which I thought was really fascinating, because those are not as common, but there are a couple more popping up throughout the US, these skin of color, very niche clinics.
So, in terms of the next milestone for your company, is it raising a little bit of money, or is it piloting with the health system, or is it something else?
Well, definitely raising more money. I think it's almost like things that we're doing in parallel, and then we're also, with the product that we're developing, which is part of the proposal, trying to get a pilot study going on.
Could you mention briefly how much money are you raising right now, and on what terms, if this is open information?
Well, I don't want to give away like a specific number, because I think for us what's important is we do recognize we're still in like the seed stage. And I think this is actually something when it comes to the financials of being an entrepreneur, very interesting topic, because I've been working with other entrepreneurs, and well, it's a bit of a tangent, but this is going to it's like valuations of companies, which I think is such an interesting topic, because I know like some companies that are dealing with, like, I guess maybe it's just so interesting, because there's no one straight formula. So it's just the numbers when it comes to being in a startup is so fascinating. Like, if you look at the field of digital health, and I'm sorry if I'm going on a tangent, but I just have to share, like, it's I think it's really interesting how people try to come up with these numbers, but it's just like, at the same time, I think it's really hard to have like a direct, like, undisputed value, because you look at digital health during the COVID pandemic, right? The funding went so high, and the valuations were so high for all these companies, and then these past 2 years, it just like kind of went a bit more down. And I think it's just so fascinating, because it's like people are always trying to pinpoint a specific value, and it's really hard to have 100% precision and accuracy. So yeah, just wanted to go on that tangent.
Yeah, sure. And there are, I think, and I'm not expert on like valuations, but I know a lot of companies are choosing safe notes where you kind of defer the specific valuation of your business. So there are ways to work around that. But I agree. At the end of the day, this is like all about perception. How do you perceive value, and how do people you're talking to, your investors, perceive the potential of this company to be successful? What I found helpful is like Y Combinator. I think they buy 7% of your company for $125,000 or something like that. And to me, that's a good like estimate for any startup that doesn't know how much it's worth. Uh, like this could be potentially a starting point. But we talked a little bit about traction. I'm curious about challenges of being a startup founder. In our previous conversation, we talked about the challenges of being part of the demographic you're helping, being a woman of color. So could you talk a little bit about that side of your journey?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, a lot of my experience, I am happy to say that I've met a lot of people who are genuinely supportive, and if anything, they see me as being a woman of color as like this added advantage because it's part of like their whole, Skinterest is literally for people of color. So they want to see people who like I can identify as that as part of the founding team. If anything, sometimes it can be difficult navigating this journey just because of, I guess, I like to call it like your why intercept point, right? Like what resources do you have from the beginning? And both my co-founder and I, we would always hear about the importance of like having like a friends and family stage. And we're both like children of immigrants, like first gen students. Uh, and all that. So that didn't necessarily apply to us because we didn't necessarily have like the resources to even do like a friends and family stage in the beginning. So just like certain things like that, I think were part of the challenges or barriers that we just had to overcome as like female founders, as first gen founders. Um, and I think it's like it is important just to note that it is just a genuinely difficult area to navigate. I've heard countless stories of like other women who have spoken directly to VCs and they love their their ideas of startups that they're working on, but it doesn't necessarily translate into a deal. And one person even directly told her that they just don't have I forgot the exact wording, but they literally told her to her face that they don't like invest in women anymore.
Mhm.
And they even said that they did in the past, but for some reason their experience was that the female founder-led ventures just didn't perform as well, which, I don't know what that meant in terms of like metrics wise, but there's a lot of barriers. I mean, when you look at the data and the stats, like female founded startups do tend to get less VC funding, so you're already having to deal with that. And I just think from my experience, like I mentioned, like starting off with like less resources from the beginning, so having to navigate that even more so. Like I've met founders who they just had more resources. Like literally, there was this one venture who I think his best friend was like had a really high level position at a pharmaceutical company, and and like I said, it's a very like complex conversation. But I think if anything, in the beginning, has to do just like with resource allocations, like what resources, who do you know from the beginning? Like that is sometimes part of like the challenges even navigating the startup space.
I view this situation from two angles. We can look at challenges like lack of resources, being not in the typical investor profile, and other negative things, or just being perceived as like a young woman, especially like, are you serious about this? Like, do you care about your business or your family, and all those stereotypes, and focusing on that part, uh, or focusing on what makes you different, what makes like can and I can speak from my experience. I came to Charlotte, North Carolina from Belarus, so I'm an immigrant myself. And you can look at this as something that kind of is a disadvantage because it's hard to compete like for corporate jobs. But in the startup world, it becomes a distinguishing feature because you are different and does become memorable. So what's your take on this? And like how how passionate are you about driving like the bigger change, or like in the society through your startup, or do you focus primarily on things that you can directly control?
No, I definitely agree with you, and thank you for sharing your experience. Because I think for me, the way I've been viewing it mostly has been thinking of what I have to offer as part of my advantages, as part of my profile of who I am. And so, like you said, it's not necessarily, even though yes, there are, like these societal barriers, right, that we have to deal with from the beginning. If anything, it like motivates me even more to, I guess, not surrender to a statistic and to try to be, try to change, like you said, um, the current landscape. So that's definitely part of the reason why me and my co-founder, we view this as such an important passion project. And I think, you know, like having that added experience of being able to identify with the people that we're targeting for this product really, I think, is beneficial. And I think what I like to do a lot of the times is I like to surround myself with just like really awesome people who have had, I guess, a somewhat similar experiences, and then it just creates like this unity and solidarity where I think it validates that, yes, this is definitely like a systemic issue, but at the same time, as an individual, you have your own power to be able to contribute and make maybe like micro changes that can eventually add up to something big. And I think that's why I really, really am grateful for my community. And I think one thing I do also want to add, which a lot of entrepreneurs face, is imposter syndrome, right? Which is essentially when you feel like, even though it hasn't been officially diagnosed yet, I think, as a psychological clinician, but I've definitely heard a lot of people in my various workspaces talk about struggling with it, where it's something that they feel like they're not good enough. Even though like I meet these people, I'm like, wait a minute, like you literally have so many amazing things on your resume. How can you think you're not good enough? But it's a very real condition. Sometimes, you just feel like you're still not at as accomplished as your, as your resume might say otherwise. And so I think, being like a data analyst, what I like to do during those times when I feel like that is I try to take an objective approach, and I always like to list all my accomplishments, my achievements, even if it's something as like to not a even if it's not as a huge scale, but it was still something really important that I accomplished during the day, because I think it's important even in your day to day to remind yourself of the things that you have achieved, so that you don't give in to, I guess, those noises of negativity.
So kudos to you for not just kind of focusing on your personal life and improving, just surrounding yourself with the right people, but also doing something that can have an impact on at a much larger scale. This is always inspiring to see. So let's talk about VMS, a venture mentoring program that you're involved in. Could you talk a little bit about your specific role? How big is the team and how big is the program?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So I am, my role as part of the Long Island Bio Mentoring Initiative, which is the official name for our mentor program, is I'm the operations manager. And as the operations manager for the LIBMI, I work with a team. I would say with the Center for Biotechnology, our team is relatively small, but it's filled with people with big hearts. So it's about it's like less than 10 people, but honestly, the people here can have been working within the space to try to support entrepreneurs for a long time. I actually met Diane Babel, who was the director, um, through a mutual joint project, and so she saw my entrepreneurial spirit, and there was actually an opening during the time for someone to run this mentorship program, and I thought, wow, this is literally such a perfect fit, because as an entrepreneur myself, and just in general, I like to think I like to, if I can, help people in whatever capacity I can. That's something I'm always interested in. And so I essentially joined the mentor program to try to create, set up these mentorship sessions, which usually occur on a monthly basis, try to recruit entrepreneurs as well, and also mentors who are just generally interested in the field, and they're looking to, just volunteer their time and share their expertise, which honestly, it's just honest. I just want to say kudos to like and thank you to the mentor team, because there have been so many mentors who I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but it's just so heartwarming to see that they really just care about the entrepreneurs themselves. They're very passionate about the field, and they just are so willing to give and volunteer some of their time just to see their growth. So it's very nice to see that.
So how many companies or ventures do you have, and how many mentors in your program?
We have, I would say, roughly about somewhere around 30 um, mentors, and we're actually recruiting a few more. And I would say for our ventures, I think we have about, I would say, like 15 or so entrepreneurs or companies within the program. So our program is relatively on the smaller side. But I think right now, for what it allows it to do, is that we can create more. I think it allows for a certain level of, I guess, I don't know if intimacy is the right word, but it's almost as it's like a professional environment, but like a closeness, where everyone kind of knows each other. And I think I've seen really, really great mentor sessions where you can tell the entrepreneur is like struggling with something, and the mentors are very helpful.
I wanted to clarify, you mentioned that there is a team of 10, but who is, other than you, who is directly involved into the management process of the VMS?
So I would say, so my role is specifically focused on the mentor program, and with the Center for Biotechnology, we have all these other various programs. I mentioned Diane Babel, who is the director, and she also spearheads BARDA, which I can pull up. I always know it's such a long acronym, but that stands for Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. So it's like another affiliate program that we have to help find these life science companies. And essentially, a lot of the work that we do at the Center for Biotechnology is focused on economic development. So in addition to Diane, we have someone named Kate Hutchinson, who's also amazing, who helps spearhead a lot of these programs. And so you'll see that we work very side by side. It doesn't, even though I'm in charge of the mentorship program, I don't necessarily feel like I'm working in silos, because all these programs are related. And so essentially, sometimes what happens is, if I am working with a company and I know that this company is seeking SBIR grant funding, then I can actually refer them to Kate, who helps run this program where we give office hours, free office hours, to entrepreneurs who are looking for support in SBIR grant writing. So it's all very correlated.
I like it a lot, because then you truly can create this impact, and you also have mentors, volunteers who can potentially be leveraged across programs. That's what I've seen done. So in terms of the model of how things work, do you use like plain vanilla MIT style model, or have you made any tweaks or adjustments specifically for your situation?
I think definitely we made a few tweaks and adjustments here and there. Really, for us, well, I would say we kept the foundation the same, where we definitely emphasize the need to maintain a conflict-free environment. And for us, that means, like, for example, we might have certain mentors who are actually also, they work as consultants, and if there is ever a opportunity, they're interested in participating in a company or entrepreneur's company as a service provider, we actually end up having to, we remove them from the mentor team, because we don't want to create any conflict, maintain that conflict-free environment. So those always still apply. But maybe in terms of just like running the program, we just try to, it's a case-by-case basis. So we might try to, just try to create a space where everyone feels as comfortable, but also maintain a professional environment. So maybe it might not feel as like stifled, if that makes sense. Like I don't mind, like sometimes I'll introduce like a question of the day to try to liven up the mood or whatever. Like I don't necessarily follow like a standard script, or but we still apply the foundational principles from VMS.
And for how many years have you been involved with the mentorship program?
I think this is going to be my second year actually, but the end of this year, this fall. Yeah.
Very cool. So over this time, I'm sure there were some learnings and takeaways. Could you share a couple of things that, I don't know, surprised you, or you consider insights that could be valuable for someone just getting started with a VMS-like program?
Sure. I think so. One takeaway I had gotten from this program is that I think people I think what even if you find people who have just various backgrounds, right? Like let's say someone is working at like a medical device company and there's someone else who works more on therapeutics. It might not feel like such a great mentor fit, but I found that sometimes it's a good mentor-mentee connection goes beyond just what's in writing. It all depends also like what the connection between those two can be like. And and I think also being in the startup space, you'll find that there are people, mentors included, who can have experience in other fields. And so the person, like for example, I matched in the mentor team with this more who had a more therapeutics background, but their mentee was focused more on a medical device, has experience running a startup themselves, being a co-founder and operations experience. And I knew that this mentee could benefit from that kind of expertise and knowledge. And so I was generally happy to see that they were able to give really good feedback, because sometimes you might think that just because their field doesn't match the other mentees' field, that it might not be a good fit, but that's not always the case.
And I'm curious, in terms of requirements for mentors, how do you make sure that they have any, like a specific background connected with medicine or life sciences, or is it more open?
Well, because we are a life science mentorship program, we definitely primarily recruit people who are familiar with the life science landscape. But sometimes we might have, for example, like legal kind of related questions. And so if someone is, more in the legal space and not necessarily life science focused, they may be a candidate. But I would say it's really mostly life science because it's such a niche. Well, I would say it's such a focused field, right? It's really important that whoever ends up, being part of our mentor cohort has some familiarity, some understanding, because I think that helps a lot with the mentees. Also, it gives them some confidence that, hi, I'm working on this specific venture, and they just happen to have some familiarity and understanding of how this life science venture works within the startup space.
And what are your requirements for ventures?
Well, definitely life science focused, but that's a huge umbrella term. So luckily, I don't think that's really uh, kept away a lot of really great companies from our end. I think for us, when we look for is we definitely put a lot of emphasis on the entrepreneur themselves or the mentee. We like to see people who really embody the entrepreneurial spirit, that they're go-getters, they can they're coachable, and so they can take constructive criticism really well and then turn it into something positive, for themselves and for the company. And I know that MIT VMS especially emphasizes that a successful mentor session is not necessarily about the company, but it's about the entrepreneur, like how you are helping them. And, so that's one of the reasons why we emphasize that so much, because even if a company is at, say, a less advanced stage, if we think that an entrepreneur has a lot to offer, this might be something we would consider.
And how formal is this intake process?
We do share an application for them to fill out. And I think I want to also add that before we recruit or have anyone part of the mentor program officially, they also have to go through something what we call the strategy session, which is where, as I mentioned, my other Center for Biotechnology colleagues, what they'll do is that we'll have uh, these these presentations where the entrepreneur will share their presentation, what they're working on with their company, and present to a wider audience consisting of our mentors and also like non-mentor team specific advisors who show up on an ad hoc basis to give also more unfiltered feedback. And I think it's a really good opportunity. It's almost like a pre-mentor session, if you will, that we have for them to kind of get used to the process of taking this unfiltered feedback, presenting to, a wider audience who might not have any idea of what you're working on. And for us, we have that set up so that they have an understanding how the program works.
The challenge I had when running the program is that we had more applications than we were able to take, and we had to make some choices. Like, are you the person making those choices, or is it done differently?
I'm part of that decision-making process. Usually what I do is I consult with Diane, my director, and we usually review those applications together.
So it is competitive on your end as well.
I guess I like to think of it as, like, I think the nature of all these programs, yes, can be competitive, but really what we're looking for is we're just looking for, the people who have a lot to offer. So as an entrepreneur yourself, like if you embody that entrepreneurial spirit, right? That's one of the main things that we look for. And I think the interview, especially that we have with potential mentees, is one of the most important parts of the process because that's how we can, essentially see like how you carry yourself and just a lot of like important things that might not come across in an application. So I like to still create, like an open opportunity for anyone if they're listening is interested. Is we really want to see how you are as an entrepreneur. We put a lot of emphasis on that.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to talk a little bit about logistics of running the mentorship program. And we discussed that you're using right now, like not a specific tool, but a combination like Google Drive, Excel. What have you found works well in that setup? And where are the areas that you would like to see some improvements down the line?
So I think for me, I know I talked about the importance of being organized. So I love color coding things, which Google Drive allows you to do, which lets me see the various stages that a specific mentee company might be at. I think with Google Drive, because it has a lot of storage space, I'm able to create different folders and like upload various documents, which is nice that it's all in one place. So it allows me to be able to share that with my collaborators. And yeah, since I also work in data, I do enjoy like Excel, like working on Excel spreadsheets and then, being able to use the various functions, like even as something as basic as the filter function can be very helpful when I need to just like focus on various, I guess, subcategories of my mentee or mentors. And I think if I could suggest some improvements, in general, it would be nice. Like, for example, after I finish a mentor session, I would love to have a way to just automatically send out these surveys that I usually send to both the mentees and the mentors versus just like manually writing my own emails. And then it would be nice if, maybe having a way to better, I guess, schedule. I know this is probably something like Traction 5 offers, like a better scheduling system. But yeah, I know like for me, those are like the top two things. Like automatic emails would be great, a scheduling system, and yeah, those are top two things.
Yeah, definitely. Let's continue the conversation on the Traction 5 side because those were the first two things that I cared about as well.
Yeah.
Honestly, the biggest challenge for me was getting founder notes. I was able to recruit one of the mentors who helped to get lead mentor reports from mentors, but getting founder notes, I got like 20%. But once you add automation, it bumps up to 90%. If the expectations are set correctly. And this is nice to see what exactly founders took away because I was surprised more than once with the takeaways that we got.
Wow.
So what gets you most excited about the future? Any specific digital health initiatives within your startup and within the VMS program that you're running?
I think in general, I'm definitely because especially since we're in this space with AI, and I'm sure you've seen all the recent hype with like ChatGPT and this rapid evolution of artificial intelligence, definitely stuff that I'm interested in. If anything, for me, what's important, and I'm hoping that in the future that we have more establishment of regulations and things like that, because with the rapid evolution of AI, I could just foresee so many, and we're already kind of dealing with that, like, professors complaining about chat GPT, quote unquote, essays or whatnot, like having better regulations regarding the use of AI in various tools. And I know it's already happening now, and I think it's going to continue happening in the future, that a lot of companies are going to push to incorporate AI into their products, from natural language processing to image processing technology. It's going to be a lot of increased interest in the area.
Is it something that you're planning to do with Skinterest as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think one of the primary points of Skinterest is that we want to address that implicit bias that would already exist with these AI models that are trained in biased dermatology models that don't have enough images of skin of color. And so that means that they're going to be missing on analyzing the skin lesions that, if it was trained properly, it would have less bias. So that's essentially one of the main things that we're focusing on.
And on the mentorship side, or with the mentorship program, anything specific you would like to accomplish in the next 12 months?
I think for sure, I think I would like to also recruit more mentors, maybe in the digital health space, in addition to more mentees. But most of our companies focus on, I would say, therapeutics and medical devices. And I know it's a bit of a, I guess, like a bump in the road I guess, the funding financials of digital health these past few years. But I still think there's important growth in that area. And so for that reason, I would love to have more mentors and mentees who have backgrounds in that. And I think just in general, like, we're always looking to grow this program and eventually just help as many entrepreneurs as we can. And so that's always something we're always openly recruiting.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
And so we conclude this inspiring episode with our esteemed guest, Ashley Abid. Her insights into clinical research, entrepreneurship, and mentorship have provided us with enlightening perspective on how innovation, determination, and the right support can lead to remarkable outcomes. This is Igor Gorlatov, founder of Traction 5, reminding you that our platform offers all-encompassing solution for data-driven mentorship. Our mission is to revolutionize corporate innovation and startup growth, one mentorship experience at a time.